driven by a fundamental belief that everyone should have local and convenient access to a high-quality cancer care. Their dedication to the vision is the catalyst of Mri Perkins emerging as Louisiana's leading cancer organization. In recent years, Todd's determination to expand access to cancer care has led to the development of innovative, comprehensive cancer and radiation therapy centers. These efforts have resulted in the provision of vital treatment and services to thousands of cancer patients close to home. Todd is a graduate of LSU, and he's also a graduate, received his MBA from the University of Houston. Please help me welcome Todd Stevens.
Thank you very much. Is everybody here okay? I know the mic's a little faint. I'll speak up. So, to get started, just remind yourself that everything in moderation is fine. So when you're eating those hush puppies, it's okay. It's totally fine. So I'm thrilled to be here today, have an opportunity to talk about cancer in Louisiana and talk about Mri Perkins Cancer Center. I hope to tell you a little bit of a story about why cancer care is so exciting, and also we have challenges ahead. So if you'll bear with me, I think all of this will make sense as we go through. There's the microphone. Thank you very much. So just a little bit about my background. I did graduate from LSU, and I think it was 1988. And if you recall, Louisiana in 1988, opportunities for 22-year-olds weren't that exciting. So I got in a Toyota Celica and drove to Houston, Texas, and started passing my resume out, and was privileged when MD Anderson Cancer Center called me and asked me to come to work for the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. I spent 9 really exciting years working at MD Anderson, and I left there and joined a company. At the time, the name was American Oncology Resources. We called it AOR. And AOR was a startup company focused on bringing cancer care more readily available into communities across the country. Today, that company is known as US Oncology. And then Kelly and I, my wife of 30 years almost, decided to have a child, and Houston was pretty big. So we decided to move back to Baton Rouge, and I joined Mri Perkins at the end of September in 1999. So that's just a little bit of my background. If you do the math, I've been in the cancer care field for 32 years. It's all I've ever done professionally. My education is in finance and quantitative business analysis and statistics. So you might wonder, well, why are you working in the healthcare industry? And I believe in being at the right place at the right time and walking through doors that are open for you. And I remember being at a meeting in college one night, and somebody said, "Hey, I'm a senior, I'm graduating, I'm leaving a job with a local ENT surgeon here in Baton Rouge if anybody wants that job." So I rushed up to him after the meeting and said, "Hey, I'd love that." And he took me the next day, introduced me to the physician, and I got hired. And I was fascinated with the healthcare field from the business and the strategic side. So that is how I ended up working in the healthcare field. So the topic today, Mri Perkins Cancer Center is celebrating its 50th year. It was organized in 1968 by a few community leaders who wanted to bring cancer care into Baton Rouge. It opened its doors in 1971 and has just continually expanded because of its cancer-focused mission during those 50 years. You know, what's ironic about Mri Perkins being founded in 1971, that's the same year that President Nixon announced the war on cancer. So it tracked, Mri Perkins' formation tracked a national focus on cancer care. And if you think back to the 70s, cancer diagnosis was just a very debilitating diagnosis. If you go look at some of the published data on cancer care and mortality rates and how things have progressed, you'll find that a cancer diagnosis in 1971, 5-year survival was abysmally low. It was very problematic. And as you track forward through the next several decades, mortality from cancer care is falling, and there are so many great stories along the way. So that's what I want to visit with you about, is how that has happened and how Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center, by being a cancer-focused organization, is bringing those values and those tools here to Louisiana. So that's what you're in store for. I promised myself I'm not going to bore you with a lot of facts and figures. But if you want facts and figures after to back up some of these things, I'd love to direct you to the sources of information. So how does this amazing evolution happen? Well, it can be traced back, frankly, to computerization. If you think about the world we live in today with the little contraption in your hand that's more powerful than all of the computers that launched men to the moon, that iPhone has more computing power in it than NASA had when we put people in space. If you think about that and you apply it to medicine, it just opened this tremendous corridor for science and innovation. And if you think back to the mapping of the genome, seems like that was a long time ago, but in terms of science, it's very nearby. So the mapping of the genome, computing power, has allowed scientists to speed up how fast we can provide innovation. If you think about the recent coronavirus vaccine, that was a whirlwind of science to be able to produce a vaccine that could go through trials and be administered to humans in the short order that it was. So in cancer care, in addition to the human genome, computing power allowed us to do amazing things with diagnostic devices. So everybody's probably had a CT scan or an MRI or a PET scan, which stands for positron emission tomography, or some other various form of a diagnostic tool. Those things did not exist in the form they do today, even 10 years ago. So that computerization is allowing physicians to be able to see things going on with a cancer diagnosis that they just couldn't see before. And then at the same time, that same level of sophistication is being brought into the treatment world. Once you've diagnosed a cancer and you believe you understand what's happening with it, you have to figure out how to treat it. So historically, there have been 3 pillars of treating a cancer patient: chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. Recently, they've introduced a 4th pillar called immunotherapy, which I'll touch on in a little while. But those devices that we use to treat patients today are expanding and rapidly expanding and getting more and more innovative. Robotic surgery, the ability to do real-time radiation therapy where you can literally look into the body while you're treating the patient and adjust the dose to protect healthy tissues and to destroy the bad ones. And that reminded me to let you know about a wonderful technology that Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center will bring in 2022 to Louisiana. It's an example of that innovation. I recall being at MD Anderson many years ago, and one of the wonderful things about that organization is you worked for physicians. Physicians led that organization and lead it to this day. So they thought it was very important to bring non-medical people into the medical world. So I enjoyed sitting through hundreds of lectures from physicians about topics that I didn't understand. But every once in a while would connect the idea of the intersection of a really good idea that they might have with the facts and figures that go behind physics and biology. And I was just smart enough to say, well, that would make a huge difference if you could do those things. And today, many of those things are coming to pass. One of those is an MRI Linear Accelerator. And if you go study a little bit about magnetic resonance imaging, it's a big magnet, and linear accelerators that are producing tens of thousands of electron volts. The fact that they could coexist on a particular piece of equipment it's staggering. But they have figured it out, and what this device will allow us to do is literally see inside of the body real time, and we'll be permitted now to treat cancers that historically we would avoid treating. Solid tumors in the body that are relatively stable and they don't move around, that's traditionally what radiation therapy has been focused on. If the tumor's moving around and you really can't see it and you really can't figure out where it is, it's hard to treat. This device will allow our physicians to treat patients that they formerly didn't have an option for radiation therapy. Why is that important? Because when you combine that with chemotherapy and surgery, that additional radiation therapy might just be the thing that creates a prolonged survival for that patient. And ultimately, that's what this entire field is about, is advancing science, translational work into the clinic to be able to help people survive. And incidentally, the technology that I talked about, MRI Linear Accelerator, there are only a few in the United States. We'll bring our program up and running in 2022. That was possible because we had an incredible philanthropic gift from the Art Fav family, and it's being also invested in by hundreds of other donors. It's a $10+ million project. The way healthcare reimbursement works, when you bring cutting-edge technology into a community setting, it's almost impossible to make the math work from a return on investment standpoint. An organization like ours, most community organizations just would simply wait for that device to become what's called the standard of care. That may take 5 or 6 or 7 more years before it becomes the standard of care. But our physicians looked at it and studied it and knew that if we could bring that application into Louisiana, that would help people right here. And because our board of directors is exclusively focused on cancer, when our physician team presented this, the board stepped up and said, hey, we got to figure out how to make this happen. And because of philanthropy, in 2022, MRI Linear Accelerator treatment will be available here in Louisiana. Another wonderful example of the importance of why this discipline of cancer continues to move forward is there's been so much progress in the way training and education works and in how that training and education is fostered into clinical research and basic science. We have a wonderful example of contributing in this area through our what's called the LSU Mary Bird Perkins Medical Physics Program. And today, that program is referred to as a Charles M. Smith Medical Physics Program, and I'll be privileged in a second to connect the dots of why the name is changed to Charles M. Smith Medical Physics Program. So what is medical physics? It's engineering applied to medicine. And there are so many rules of the road in physics that just, you can't beat them. When you're trying to figure out how to use an MRI or a CT scanner or a linear accelerator or a robotic surgery device, physics drives a lot of what's possible in medicine. So many years ago, we started this public-private partnership with LSU, and what's really neat about it, it's with the Agricultural and Mechanical College, not with the Health Science Center in New Orleans. So it's partnered with the College of Basic Science here in Baton Rouge, and the basic science and educational side in the first couple years of these individuals as they train is done at LSU. But you have to have a lab, right? You have to have a lab to really learn. And the lab is all of those fancy devices we have in the cancer center and across our network. So now, as a consequence of this program, which really got started in 2005, we have the ability to train students with the brightest minds of LSU's faculty, and then bring those students and their faculty into a migration with Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center's physicians and our physicists. And today, this program is one of the top medical physics training programs in the world. Not in the United States, not in Louisiana, in the world. They are very well published in peer-reviewed journals. They're funded with NCI grant dollars, both on the academic side at LSU and here at Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. And what's really great is you can trace their work from graduate student to graduate student to graduate student into a final published paper that's put out in peer-reviewed journals that results in people changing the way they treat patients all over the world. That originates right here in Louisiana through Mary Bird Perkins and LSU's medical physics program. So getting back to Charles M. Smith, I want to keep this thread of why an organization like Mri Linear Perkins Cancer Center is important to Louisiana. So Dr. Smith is from Sulphur, Louisiana. We recently lost him after Hurricane Laura. Dr. Smith was a brilliant community physician, a loyal LSU supporter, and he was in the Dean's Circle at the College of Basic Science, and he also, around the time he got interested in cancer, was diagnosed with cancer. And he found out about the formation of this medical physics program, and he made an initial gift in 2005 that allowed us to attract an eminent scholar by the name of Ken Hoekstrom. Dr. Hoekstrom is a world-renowned medical physicist. He was working at MD Anderson at the time. I had the privilege of working with Dr. Hoekstrom when I was at Anderson. And lo and behold, we were able to recruit Dr. Hoekstrom to come run our program. In absence of Dr. Smith's gift, we wouldn't have been able to do it. We set up an endowed chair for Dr. Hoekstrom. The Board of Supervisors approved the program, and we were off to the races. In a few short years, the program, the master's level program, was accredited. A few short years later, the PhD program was accredited. And today, there's about 65 people in this program between educators, students, PhD candidates, and their wonderful faculty on both Mri Bird Perkins and LSU's campus. We call them mentors that work with these awesome students. So Dr. Smith, he left. He was so enthralled with this program. He stayed invested in it. He would come to the lectures. He would come to PhD defense presentations. And along the way, he wanted to make a bigger impact. And he informed us several years ago that he was going to leave a significant portion of his estate to make sure that this program continued in perpetuity. After we lost Dr. Smith last year, his estate has made over an $8 million contribution to LSU and Mri Bird Perkins Cancer Center's medical physics program. It's going to it's doubling the endowment of the chair for the medical physics program. It allowed us to recruit another eminent scholar into that program, and it's going to fund numerous graduate students and other programs to make certain that physics and medicine and the evolution is available right here in Baton Rouge. And then when it's available here, guess what? People across the world will learn from what we're doing right here in Louisiana. So that's a long explanation of a wonderful program, but if you're not paying attention, it's hard to know that there's a medical physics program like that. It's a niche program, but it's one that makes a huge impact in the world. Another partnership I wanted to mention is our partnership with LSU Health Science Center in New Orleans. Clinical research continues to be a foundation of how you move from a basic science idea through what's called translational research and into a clinical setting. So what is clinical research? It's the foundation of establishing a new standard of care. So today, if you're diagnosed with a particular type of cancer and you hear the word standard of care, a lot of people hear standard care, and they don't want standard care. Standard of care in medicine is not standard care. It is the best evidence-based care to receive at the time. But in cancer care, we want to continuously evolve that standard of care. And to do that, you have to evolve it through clinical research. You have to have a very rigorous program to figure out, is A better than B? So clinical research is founded and funded through the National Cancer Institute out of Washington, D.C. We have been partners with the National Cancer Institute in funded competitive research since 2007. And today we enjoy being a principal part of what is called the National Cancer Institute's Community Oncology Research Program. And that is a partnership between Mri Bird Perkins Cancer Center and the LSU Health Science Center in New Orleans and other partners that brings clinical research from what are called the National Cancer Institute research bases. These are academic institutions that originate novel research, but guess what? They make that research available through the National Cancer Institute to the NCORE partners. So as a consequence, there are thousands and thousands of patients across Louisiana who have access to NCI-funded clinical research as a consequence. We also do our own clinical research through our physics program and also with pharmaceutical trials. So all of that work is what's advancing cancer care, and it's going to continue to rapidly advance. This foundation is why it's critical that Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center and organizations like MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering in New York exist to focus exclusively on cancer. If you step away from the healthcare world, and it's big, I think healthcare is eating up about 21% or so of gross domestic product right now. It's gigantic. Cancer care is just a little sleeve of that, but it's one that has been a global pandemic for my whole life and your whole life and generations before. Over 650,000 people die of cancer in the United States every single year, year after year after year. Now, mortality rates are declining, but that's still way too many people. So we've got to keep this pace going. The last piece I wanted to touch on before I mention a topic that's really important to me and to our organization, which is early detection and prevention. I also wanted to mention something else that's a vector that's making a huge difference. Cancer care, because of genomics, all of the computerization and specialization that I mentioned before, it's becoming very subspecialized. When I first started work in this field in the late 80s, breast cancer was breast cancer. We thought it was one disease. Breast cancer is hundreds of different types of disease. And mapping the genome and figuring out all of these targets that scientists call are what is necessary to keep up with how you treat cancer. And it's on all four of those vectors I mentioned: radiation therapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and surgery. So the field is getting more and more subspecialized. We have physicians in our programs that just take care of one or two different types of cancer. A breast cancer specialist, for example, colorectal cancer specialist, for example. And if you go and you look in the academic setting at the large NCI designated cancer centers, that's how they're structured. Now, historically, those large cancer centers are so well funded they can afford to do that. Organizations like Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center can also afford to do it because it's our mission. It's all we worry about. So we're going to continue to drive subspecialization. And I'm going to conclude in a few minutes with why I think that's so critical. Now I want to visit with you about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is prevention and early detection. And it's near and dear to my heart because of the organization I work for. And I'll touch on in a minute why Mary Bird Perkins' investment and through its board of directors in 2002, that this state is, the volunteers that serve on our board never ask for anything, but in this case they deserve a huge pat on the back. Our state has been challenged for decades in high death rates from cancer. When I joined Mary Bird Perkins in the late 90s, we were swapping back and forth for the 50th in the nation. We have moved down. That's the good news. I think we're 44th right now. That's a dramatic move in just a few short years. But why is that the case? Well, access to primary prevention. So what does cancer prevention mean? So if you had a colonoscopy and a gastroenterologist removes a polyp, you prevented cancer. So that's a classic example of how to prevent cancer. There's so many other things you can do to prevent the disease. You can eat healthy, you can exercise, but that's not gonna limit all the disease from possibly happening. So guess what? Early detection is absolutely the best predictor of a high-quality outcome. So in 2002, our board of directors, after they saw data about how many people, and I'm going to say this carefully, needlessly died of cancer in Louisiana simply because they didn't have access to mammography, they didn't have access to primary prevention, they'd never seen a dermatologist, and they had a melanoma diagnosis that was advanced. Our board of directors stepped up and said, we're going to form an outreach network that focuses exclusively on bringing education and early detection into underserved communities across Louisiana. In 2002, I remember being in the meeting, somebody raised their hand and said, let's buy a big mobile medical clinic and call it the Early Bird. I thought that was pretty cool. So that's what we did with support of Exxon and other organizations, our legislators at the time on Capitol Hill. we were able to secure enough money to buy our first mobile medical clinic. Today we operate 2 with a team of about 12 people, and I'm proud to tell you that since 2002 they have screened for free and followed up on over 100,000 individuals across about 26 parishes in the state of Louisiana. So that's Tiger Stadium, filled to the brim. Every one of those seats, someone had challenges to access to care, and those mobile medical clinics and our nurses and our lab techs and PAs and physicians that work with us pulled that bus up into a community health center, a church, a parking lot at a Home Depot, a parking lot at a Walmart, and they opened the doors and people came in and got screened. And as a consequence of that, we know that diagnosis and stage of disease, so you've heard stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So when we first started this program, we started tracking stage of disease for breast cancer patients that we diagnosed in the program, and we found that they were often about stage 3B. Remember what I said about early detection being the best predictor of a positive outcome? Stage 3B is a long way from stage 1A. So we said, let's track this a few years from now, and we engaged Terry Fontham from the LSU school in New Orleans, and she put together a research project for us, and 3 and 5 years later, we found that the stage of disease had gone from 3B down to 2A as a consequence of that program and that same cohort. So we knew there that that investment was making a difference. It was evidence-based, so we continued to double down. That's when we brought on another mobile medical clinic, and I'm proud to announce that we're about to bring on a 3rd mobile medical clinic so we can serve the Delta region of our state. We were able to, with the good graces of the Blue Cross Foundation that saw a lot of our data and realized that it was making a difference in underserved communities that faced health equity challenges, we were able to secure a grant from Blue Cross Foundation, and now we're providing cancer screenings in the Delta region, and we hope to continue to expand that. So I'm going to try to wrap up, but I want to connect all these dots. So science, education, specialization. It's a really complicated world out there in cancer care. It's very complex, and it's not going to slow down. The pace of innovation is going to continue. I believe that the way that the coronavirus vaccine was done, and the biology and the nature of the way they did it is going to advance cancer research. And I think if you read that, you'll see it. I think it's real. People are speculating about it, but from the physicians I have the privilege of working with and scientists, they're very excited about how the future of cancer research shapes up because of the lessons that we learned during the pandemic. So where's that going? We're back to Louisiana. We have largely a rural state. We've got the most extreme health inequities that you can see in the United States. All of us sitting in this room, if we're diagnosed with cancer, if you've experienced cancer, you likely had access to the standard of care. If you got diagnosed tomorrow, you would likely have access to the standard of care, and you'd likely be offered a clinical trial. And you would participate in all of these wonderful things that I've talked about. But if you step back away, and you pay attention to so many people, not only in Louisiana, but across the United States, that are challenged by transportation issues, income disparities, lack of access to primary prevention and detection, they're not going to be afforded often the same that we would be afforded if we were diagnosed with cancer. So back to why this is so close to what I believe in, Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center, because all we do is focus on cancer, we look at these numbers all day, every day, and our board of directors and our leadership and our physicians want to continue to do something about it so that every single person can have access to high quality care. You want to be able to meet the patient where they are with the right care at the right time. That's really, really hard in rural Louisiana. If you're in Newellton and you're driving a tractor and you have to figure out how to get to Shreveport, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, or Houston to get your cancer care, and they tell you it's going to be $50,000 and you're going to have to spend weeks and nights away from your family, oftentimes those individuals choose to have no care or much less care. We've got to find a way in the future where we can bridge that health equity gap for everyone, no matter what the circumstances, if it's racially motivated or based, or if it's income based, whatever the challenge is, we have to find a way where everybody's afforded the same access to high quality health care, and in particular cancer care. So we're going to stay focused on that. We're going to pay attention to innovation as it continues to advance. We're going to bring those innovations to Louisiana through philanthropy and through our programs as soon as we can get them here so that people in our state are afforded access to it. We're going to continue to care for people who are un- and underinsured and don't have money, because we believe in health equity and we want everyone to have the best possible chance to have a great outcome. And we're going to continue to invest in outreach and programming and all of the wonderful things that you've heard about. But that's not enough. We have to do more. Those challenges are not going to go away. Louisiana's economy, ups and downs, it's going to continue to leave people disadvantaged. And as a thing to end with, I mentioned that early detection is the best possible prediction of an outcome. Every person in this state, every person in the United States deserves the chance to have that apply to them. And we're a long way from that, and we're going to continue to invest in those programs and those services until that is realized. So I will wrap up there. I could continue to talk and bore you, but that's the state of cancer care in Louisiana and all the wonderful things going on at Mri Perkins Cancer Center over the course of its 50 years that makes a difference in outcomes and makes a difference in the lives of those who are touched by cancer. So I thank you for your attention. I'd love to answer any questions that arise. Yes, sir.
So with the split between Mri Perkins and Our Lady of the Lake, Our Lady of the Lake announcing they're going to build this big cancer center, Ochsner moving into the market. I know you're not chasing all of the healthcare dollars because you're focused on cancer, but how confident are you that there's enough business to go around for everybody in Baton Rouge?
Well, unfortunately, there's way too much cancer in Louisiana. And when you step back and you think about the things that I spoke about, healthcare is as complicated outside of cancer as it is specifically focused on cancer. So if you step back and you look at a large health system, be it an Ochsner or a Kaiser Permanente or any other large health system that's out there, they are trying to be all things to an individual cradle to grave. Y'all recently saw that General Electric is splitting up into 3 companies. That big multi-specialty, multinational business model didn't work. My opinion and answer to your question is, and this is just based on, I don't have facts to debate, it's 32 years of working in the healthcare industry. When it comes to cancer care, I don't think that cradle to grave model works because it's just too darn subspecialized and too focused. There's a reason that cancer centers like Mri Perkins Cancer Center and MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering exist, because it's all we worry about, it's all we care about, and I don't foresee that changing under any circumstances. Yes, sir.
You made reference to an NCI designation, you're regionally located. So how far off would you say that you guys are from Louisiana?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also a topic of discussion these days. I know LSU is, Dr. Tate is very interested in advancing the relationship with the state, with the National Cancer Institute. There's 3 different designations from the National Cancer Institute. One is the Comprehensive Cancer Center. That's the Sloan Ketterings and the MD Andersons. Then there's another that's referred to as a cancer center. And then the last is a wet lab. It's a research accreditation. I think from my experience being part of an NCI-designated cancer center and one of the ones that would sit down and grind through the thousands of papers to put the grants and all those programs together, I think in Louisiana, in the next 5 to 10 years, either the research cancer center or the cancer center designation is a possibility. But it's going to take some significantly difficult decisions to be made to reach the requirements that the NCI is looking for those. I think the capacity exists on the research designation first, because it would be less problematic to align all the forces necessary for a research designation. But remember what I mentioned, research has to, basic science translates into translational science into the clinic. And to participate at that level with the National Cancer Institute, we're going to have to bring something really novel to the basic science program for them to step back and say, yes, join forces with us. So it's a very complicated discussion. I think the designated National Cancer Institute cancer centers, that's decades away for Louisiana. The idea that an MD Anderson or a Sloan Kettering with the basic science and I think the Anderson's probably is a $3 billion a year annual budget. If I had to guess by now, when I left, it was 1.4 billion. Those organizations are gigantic. So that's the story there. I think there's some real potential for a research designation or a cancer center designation, but there's a lot of complexity to go from here to there. Good question. Yes, sir.
Was there any sort of one specific event that led to a partnership with One Oncology, and what is the status of Mri Perkins' relationship with our Lady of the Lake right now?
So I think everything that I talked about today is the formation of the relationship with One Oncology. As healthcare continues to consolidate and the large health systems like Ochsner and others form, we needed a partner that would allow us to continue to stay focused exclusively on cancer. And when we stepped back and looked at the ideological differences between where the Franciscan Mission of Our Lady Health System needed to go and where Mary Bird needed to go, they didn't intersect anymore. It's just that simple. We needed to stay exclusively focused on cancer, and FMOL and like Ochsner and others have to do so many more things. So we reached out to One Oncology and started an exploration, it was April of last year, I believe, or April of this year, I believe, when we started to figure out that we might have to go in a different direction because of those ideological differences. So I think that's, what was the second part of your question?
What's the relationship right now like with Our Lady of the Lake?
Oh, well, we have been on Our Lady of the Lake's campus for a long time, and we're going to continue to be on their campus and work with their medical staff. What's great about hospitals is all hospitals have a community. So Baton Rouge General has a community, the Lake has a community, Women's Hospital has a community, and we're going to be able to coexist on all three of those campuses with our cancer care programs. So in the specific answer to your question, we're working really hard to kind of unwind some of the business integration that existed, things like leases and access to information technology and all of those things. And those discussions are going well. Our respective chief operating officers meet routinely and weekly to go through those things, and they're focusing on making certain that patients, whether they're cared for by an Our Lady of the Lake physician or a physician that will be affiliated after January with Mary Bird Perkins, that those patients are aware of the circumstances and have a choice where they want to continue to have their care. So it's actually going quite well. Yes, sir. Harry.
Does your long-range plan contemplate a competing cancer center on the OLOL campus in the next 10 years?
Well, all we can do is control what we control, and we control our investment and focused on patients with cancer. So if competitors want to make investments in this space, there's a part of me that would when I showed up in Louisiana in 1999, cancer care was in a real kind of slow state. It wasn't advancing. And several people a few years later said, "Wow, you're really smart." And I wasn't smart. I just brought stuff that I learned from Houston and my work at U.S. Oncology here into this marketplace. Things that were done 10 and 12 and 15 years ago in other states, that when I found the state of cancer care here, I was like, wow, we need to step it up. What's great today, and I think I attribute a lot of this to Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center and its board and its donors giving us the space to make these investments. Today, that's not the case. Somebody's showing up here to work in cancer care, they're going to be like, wow, this state's kind of on it. We've got all these organizations that are really making investments in cancer care. So we take great pride in the fact that we're pushing other competitors to be better and take better care of patients and make more and more investments. Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center can't be in all places all the time to take care of every patient. That's fine. Those patients still deserve access to great care, and we're going to keep pushing the envelope so that when they're with us, they're getting great care, and if they're there with somebody else, they're going to get great care. That's rewarding to us because that's what we want to see. We want to see cancer eradicated. Our mission is to improve survivorship and lessen the burden of cancer. That's a very active mission statement. It's very clear. Improve survivorship and lessen the burden of cancer. You can measure that. You can measure it with statistics. You can measure it with the American Cancer Society's results that they report every year. You can measure it with patient satisfaction. You can measure it with survival data. So we're holding ourselves accountable to pushing that envelope, and I think we're spurring others on to do the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
Are you envisioning a statewide or regional network, Mary Bird, now that you have a national partner?
That's a great question. We actually already have a partial statewide network. We work in Houma, Louisiana with Terrebonne General Medical Center. We have a large presence facility on the North Shore, directly across the street from St. Tammany Parish Hospital. We have a facility on the campus of North Oaks. I wanted to mention our program and our partnership with Women's Hospital when I got to my subspecialization comments, because that is a great example of how subspecialization works in force. There's a program at Women's Hospital that's exclusively dedicated to two types of cancer, breast cancer and gynecologic cancer. And incidentally, there are very few, there may be no other programs like that in a community setting that brought those types of resources into a facility dedicated for a particular type of cancer. When we were doing our research, we didn't find it. So we're also in Natchez, Mississippi, and we do expect to continue to expand. Our work, wherever historically Mary Bird Perkins, we go where we're invited. We're not an organization that shows up in a community and sticks a flag in the ground and says, hey, Mary Bird's here, cancer care is going to get better. We slowly develop relationships in communities through navigation work and our physicians going and doing grand rounds and lectures and our mobile medical clinic going in and making a difference and demonstrating that we're not a threat to those communities. And ultimately, when we're invited, like we got invited in Houma, like we got invited on the North Shore, if you go back in the last 20 years and you look at cancer care on the North Shore before and you look at it today, I know that without Mary Bird Perkins board making that investment and pushing the envelope in that community, cancer care would not be as evolved as it is on the North Shore, nor in Houma, nor here in Baton Rouge, or anywhere else where we serve.
So do you have a working relationship with Auction or Control St. Tammany Hospital?
We do. So our physicians are on their medical staff. Hospitals are communities, and those patients that live in those communities, whether they're seen by an auctioneer doctor or an independent physician or a physician affiliated with FMOL, when you're told you have cancer, it's different. People want to be a little more focused on where they need to go for their care. And an organization that's all we do, it makes a difference. And people know that's all we do, and they appreciate it and they value it. Yes, sir, John.
I know that Mri Perkins has been real active in development fundraising over the years. Will this new affiliation take some of the heat off of that?
No, that's an awesome question. Oh, thank you for asking that. So, no, absolutely not. So much of cancer care is not reimbursed by insurance companies. So you get reimbursed for raw medical care, surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation. If you go look at there's so many people on our team, nutritionists, navigators, social workers, individuals that help patients get copay reimbursement from drug companies. They're not reimbursed by insurance companies. This idea of bringing MRI Linear Accelerators into Baton Rouge, impossible without philanthropy. So it actually, John, helps us accelerate how philanthropy will be used because of the relationship and the way we work with One Oncology. They're actually kind of partners in leveraging that philanthropy. They're going to help us pay for things on the other side of the equation that are going to free more philanthropy up to go into all those wonderful programs. So we're so blessed with community support. We're our development team that's led by Danielle Mack and her team are they're amazing, and they have a wonderful story to talk about, and they have wonderful proof points that make a difference in the lives of patients. So that's going to continue. We'll probably spend a lot more time on it now that we have a partner to help us with a lot of the kind of the blocking and tackling on the business side. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
We will be having our Christmas reception on Thursday, November 20th. What's Thursday's date? The 18th, at 6 o'clock at the Botanical Gardens. And so if you're here, please, you're invited to come. You do need to RSVP today. It'll be Thursday, November 18th at the LSU Botanical Gardens.